Merhaba arkadaşlar, güzel İstanbul şehrine hoş geldiniz. Welcome to the city of Istanbul in Turkey. This I have been waiting for so long to do. You don't understand. I've been wanting to go to Turkey for so long. My brothers have been wanting to go to Turkey for so long. I wish I could bring them with me, but unfortunately they had university, and that's what it's like when you're not a university student. You can just go at any time, work permitting, of course. But the city of Istanbul was founded as Byzantium, and then later became Constantinople after the Roman Emperor Constantine, who named it after himself in the year 330. The year 330. Then, it was obviously historically incredibly important city, but fast forward to the year 1453, which of course then this was conquered by Mehmed the Conqueror of the Ottomans, otherwise known as Mehmed Fatih. And behind me, of course, we have the Hagia Sophia mosque. Even that term is slightly controversial, but nevertheless it was obviously an Orthodox church converted to a museum first after the founding of the Republic of Turkey, and then converted back to a mosque that it was before the Republic of Turkey during the time of the Ottomans. Sorry if that explanation is confusing. But during this time, we've come at a time of incredible weather. It's obviously very cold in England right now. It's like 10 degrees even. And here it's a very sunny 30 degrees. So I cannot complain whatsoever. But it is another solo adventure. And this has been hotly anticipated because I've wanted to go for so long. You hear about Turkish culture, you watch Turkish shows, you eat Turkish food. And there's so much, of course, in the Turkish language that is so similar to Urdu, which is a language that I speak. And I can't wait to show this incredible city to all of you. The city that straddles the Bosphorus Strait, that straddles the bridge between Europe and Asia, and has been at the heart of the Silk Road and trade routes that have gone between Europe and Asia. This is Istanbul. One of the great examples of Ottoman splendor in Istanbul is the Sultan Ahmet Mosque, otherwise known as the Blue Mosque. It has 6 minarets surrounding it, and including 8 secondary domes. It was constructed between 1609 and 1616 and adorned with blue tiles, and at night is bathed in blue lights. Until its construction, the Hagia Sophia was the chief mosque of Istanbul until being superseded by the Blue Mosque. We're here at the Museum for Turkish and Islamic Arts in Istanbul. Now, it was originally built in 1524 as the Ibrahim Pasha Palace. Ibrahim Pasha was a Grand Vizier to Suleiman the Magnificent, who was one of the sultans, or caliphs, I'm not actually sure which is the correct term for that time period, of the Ottoman Empire. Now, this place is currently as a museum, incredibly rich in Islamic and Turkish history. I mean, from an Islamic point of view, 3,000 copies of the Quran are here. More than, I believe, 200,000 fragments of the Quran are here, as well as many thousands of art pieces and documents relating to the various Islamic periods, all the way from the time of the Prophets and the Caliphs, to the Umayyads, to the Abbasids, the Mamluks, the Seljuks, the Fatimids, even towards the more Iranian side, the Safavids and Qajars and Timurids dynasties as well, all present here. And there are also relics of the Prophet Muhammad, which I'm not going to go into too much because the Topkapi Palace takes that to another level. Most of them are in the Topkapi Palace, but this is the Museum for Turkish and Islamic Arts. We are at the jewel of the Ottoman Empire. It is the Topkapi Palace, which was the administrative center of the Ottoman Empire all the way from the conquest of Constantinople in 1453 till the construction of the Dolmabahce Palace by Sultan Abdul Majid in 1850 something. And this was ordered as a construction by Mehmed Fatih in 1459, about 6 years after the 1453 conquest. I don't know how I'm remembering this. And it has all the relics of all of the sultans that reigned in that time, right? We're talking all the Salims, the Mehmeds, the Mahmuds, the Murads, Suleimans, all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not going to name all of them. All of them lived here with themselves, their families, their wives, their concubines. Don't forget, I'm not going to get into a whole debate on the whole concubine business, but all of them are based here, right? And what that means is there's a huge treasure left behind. We have swords of all of these sultans here, all of the shields, armory, not just of them by the way, also of the Safavids by the way. There's one or two pieces of the Safavid, and also a diamond. This diamond is the fourth largest diamond of its kind in the world. And also, whilst I study this gimbal, I seem to have gimbal problems all the time. On top of this, of course, we have the imperial harem. Now, harem is the private place for the sultan, his wives, his concubines, his family, especially the women. The emphasis, of course, on the women of the family. They all live in these quarters, and it is absolutely I feel like I don't want to overuse the word exquisite, but it is extraordinary just in the tile work, in the calligraphy work, in the roof. And if you notice, by the way, when you think of Islamic architecture, you're thinking probably mainly something like what you see in Iran or in the Arab lands, but we see an interesting mix of Ottoman and Baroque styles in the architecture. And you'll notice, whenever I've gone to the European places, I've always talked about Baroque and Gothic. So you see a lot of that in the elements of gold, but also the use of the Ottoman Turkish blue as well. So seeing how they complement each other into this beautiful Islamic synthesis of Islamic, Turkish, Baroque, European, Iranian, all influences coming. And there's obviously of no surprise, because the Ottoman Empire ultimately wasn't just Turkey, right? It encompassed so many regions, and it's only fitting that the empire's architecture reflects the different regions that was influenced by. Now, one thing that's interesting to notice is, of course, in the calligraphy. Now, when you look at the calligraphy, what do you notice? It's not the Turkish that we know today. The Turkish that we know today is in the Latin script. Now, before, Turkish used to be written in essentially the Arabic script, right? But you'll notice it looks very similar to Urdu, because at one point, Turkish was actually written in the Nastaliq script, which is what Urdu is written in, and what Farsi used to be written in before Farsi changed to the sort of standard Arabic script. So it's just very interesting to note. And obviously Turkish became Latin script as a result of the reforms after the formation of the Republic of Turkey. Behind me is the Emaneti Mukaddes, or the Holy Trust, or better even, the Holy Relics. Now, what is being claimed here is something that I'm struggling to comprehend. Now, I'd like to put a disclaimer out there. I obviously cannot authentically or verifiably say that what is in there is exactly what is being said, but just the thought of the possibility that these are what they say they are has left me speechless, honestly, and struggling for words. We're talking, what I've seen inside now, we're talking about strands of hair of the Prophet, a sword of the Prophet, cases containing a tooth of the Prophet, and soil from Medina, of course, and also soil from Karbala, by the way. A sword attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam, a sword attributed to Jafar al-Tayyar and to Ammar Yasir, two of the greatest companions of not only the Prophet but also the Ahl Bayt, who are the family of the Prophet. And just to comprehend that obviously, like I said, it may not be the case, it may not be true, but to comprehend that maybe, just maybe, I may have seen strands of hair of the Prophet, that I may have seen a sword, that I may have seen a sword that Imam Ali used to fight to defend Islam. It's, as you saw, I was lost for words. I recommend the Topkapi Palace to everyone whenever you can go to Istanbul. Just a stone's throws away from the Topkapi Palace is the Basilica Cistern, which is our next stop. But first, let's define a cistern. A cistern is a waterproof area to hold liquids, usually water, and cisterns are often built to catch and store rainwater. The Basilica Cistern specifically is the largest cistern that lies beneath the city of Istanbul and is located 150 meters southwest of the Hagia Sophia Mosque. It was built in the 6th century during the reign of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I, and today is available with little water for public access and with lights. Illuminates the entire cistern for dramatic effect. It really is a must visit while you're here. Silica cistern over with. It is time to see the jewel, the crown of Istanbul. It is time for the Hagia Sophia.
جمعا ما تزينت في النجوم السماء صل يا ربي ثم سلم على من هو للخلق رحمة وشفاء وعلى الآل والصحابة جمعا ما تزينت.
How do you talk about the Hagia Sophia Kabir Jami Sharif, right? The Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque. Even the term mosque could be deemed as slightly controversial. I'm not going to go into the history of the controversy regarding whether this is a mosque, a museum or a church. But what I do know is that in the year 537, this was constructed as a Greek Orthodox church by Justinian. And it was meant to be the cathedral for Istanbul, and at the time of its construction it was the biggest cathedral in the world, and it was the biggest cathedral for over 1,000 years until it was overtaken by the Seville Cathedral as the largest cathedral in the world. But it still is one of the bigger cathedrals to this day, the Seville Cathedral. I believe it's the 4th largest. But Hagia Sophia, obviously as part of the conquest of Istanbul by Mehmed Fatih as part of the Waqf, essentially. The Waqf in Islamic terms is an endowment, and under the terms of the Waqf of Mehmed Fatih, he designated this site as a mosque, and so the Hagia Sophia became a mosque. And it's interesting because there are still elements of this place still being a cathedral. You have mosaic pieces showing, for example, Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary, John the Baptist, for example, are all present here. But for the longest time, they were plastered over, and many of the elements that would be part of a church, like a bell, baptistry, were all taken down. Now, after it became a mosque, we then saw the minarets, of course, being constructed, and of course we now have the Islamic architecture in play. We have different names of those figures in Islam. Obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name is here, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We also have the names of the 4 caliphs, and on top of the names of the 4 caliphs we have Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, who I guess I'm named after, and we have Imam Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. The lovely thing, not the lovely thing, but the thing to note about the calligraphy of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam is that there's a teardrop under his name, and that teardrop of course has calligraphy, but it represents the sacrifice he gave and his martyrdom on the plains of Karbala. And I'm just sitting here right now, and inshallah I'm going to stay here to pray my Dhuhr and Asr. Inshallah I want to stay here for the Maghrib Adhan. To get a feeling of an Adhan inside this kind of place is truly and utterly beautiful. And I think I'm just going to sit here and take in these sights, honestly. And we're just seeing sort of the lights here, and the way the chandeliers are, the ornaments, and it's just incredible. I mean, I'm not trying to romanticize the history too much. I know there's a lot of tension in history in terms of the Christian and Muslims crusades and whatnot. I'm not trying to romanticize it at all, but you still end up appreciating the combination and mixture of the Christian and Islamic arts and cultures, calligraphy, paintings and mosaics coming together as one here at the Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque. What an action-packed day. To think that was only day 1. And at this point, sometimes this is a whole vlog in other places, but such is the breadth, the depth, the heaviness of what there is in Istanbul, and we've only just gotten started. Anyways, we're on to day 2, where we are going to start at the Galata Tower. Then we are here at the Galata Tower in Istanbul. So the Galata Tower was constructed in 1348, originally by the Genoese as part of their Genoese colony that was here in Constantinople. Just for context, the Genoese are from Genoa. Genoa at the time was the Republic of Genoa and it is currently the city of Genoa in northwest Italy, obviously famous for trade especially. And the Galata Tower originally was constructed for that purpose, and then in 1453, yes, 1453, conquest of Constantinople by Mehmed Fatih, the Genoese colony was essentially torn down. It was emptied, or at least gone rid of, and as a result, this was not used for a while, and it initially became a prison, and then converted into a watch tower, essentially to watch over fires over Istanbul. And obviously you can get a nice view from up here. There's a 360-degree observation deck, and behind me you can see the lovely bridges. You can see what I believe this is the Golden Horn, and then the Bosphorus is over there. And yes, it's great to enjoy these. Heading down from the Galata Tower, we walk across the Galata Bridge back onto the Fatih side, where we'll be exploring the Rustem Pasha and Süleymaniye mosques. Here at the Rustem Pasha Mosque, named after Rustem Pasha, who was a Grand Vizier of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. And this mosque was built in the year 1563, and what's interesting about it is such a beautiful mosque with so much history. It's quite small obviously, but it's not some big building that you can see from far away. You only see it when you go through the straw mat weavers bazaar, which is next to the spice bazaar. And it's just phenomenal because right in the middle you have a mosque that's hundreds of years old, and you can see it's embellished beautifully with the Ottoman Turkish blue tiles all around, and then the names once again of the four caliphs, as well as Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So it's really incredible that structures like this, such beautiful structures like this, can just be found randomly in the middle of a bazaar. And I would dare say it's a hidden gem, because it's literally hidden and it's not your obvious tourist destination, despite having the beauty for it to be as such.
يا ربي صل وسلم على الحبيب محمد يا ربي صل وسلم على الحبيب محمد يا سامعين صلوا صلوا على الحبيب محمد يا ربي صل وسلم على الحبيب محمد يا ربي صل وسلم على الحبيب محمد.
So it is the Süleymaniye Jami, the Süleymaniye Mosque here in Istanbul, which is the second largest mosque in Istanbul. It was the largest for 462 years until it was overtaken by the Jamlika Mosque, which opened very recently, which I'll go soon, inshallah. The Süleymaniye Mosque was commissioned by the one and only Suleiman the Magnificent. His grave and the grave of his wife Hurrem Sultan is also here as well. And this is an example of one of the imperial Ottoman mosques. You come in, there's the big open courtyard, you see the domes, and this was commissioned in the year 1550 and it opened 7 years later in 1557. It was commissioned to the architect Minar Sinan, who was one of the famous architects of the Ottomans, also that designed the Rustem Pasha mosque that I was at, and his disciples went on to build the Sultan Ahmed Mosque as well. And it's just an incredible sight when you're here and you can't help but sit just in pure contemplation. And one thing that I've been trying to do is to pray something at each mosque, right? Dhuhr at one mosque, Asr at one mosque, a qada prayer, like a prayer that I've missed, for example, or Maghrib or something like that, because you just have to take in the place. Because one thing as well is, obviously this isn't like when you go to a shrine or when you go to Mecca, Medina, where people are always here, right? Most people who are coming to these mosques are coming for tourist purposes, and the way they usually do it is they have a section for tourists to freely roam around, and then there is a separate section purely for those who want to pray. In Hagia Sophia, the prayer section is very small at the front, but here at Süleymaniye, the majority of the area is for those who want to pray. And it makes sense because Hagia Sophia is in such a touristy area There are very few, I would say, those who are religious in the area who actually want to pray. Whereas this is there for those who want to pray, and it's just a beautiful moment of peace and contemplation. In close walking distance to the Suleymaniye Mosque is the Fatih Mosque, named after Mehmed Fatih and rebuilt in 1771 after being damaged in an earthquake. The original mosque was constructed in the year 1470 and was built and is built on the site of the Church of the Holy Apostles, the second most significant church in Byzantine Constantinople, only behind the Hagia Sophia. This is another grand example of Ottoman architecture, and the incredible part is that there are just so many of these mosques, it can really be overwhelming. Hold up, but what about the food? No vlog about Istanbul can be done without talking about the incredible culinary expertise and exquisite... Okay, I can't do these words properly. But we start first at Nusret. Of course, Nusret made most famous by Salt Bey himself. In London, by the way, this tomahawk would cost 200, 300 pounds, which is a rip-off, don't get me wrong. But here in Istanbul, it costs around 40 pounds, which makes Istanbul the most affordable Nusret in the world. And yes, you might say this is raw, but this is medium rare, and I have to say it was the juiciest steak I've had. Next up we have Hafiz Mustafa, the most famous dessert place. I had 3 kinds of baklava ice cream. This is the first type, and it was just so good. And here's type number 2. In the middle we have this sort of pistachio milk cake, and then the third one was your proper sort of baklava with the phyllo pastry on the top. It was just so good. I came every night. And of course I had to have the Turkish breakfast, which came with all kinds of cheese, eggs, pancakes, jams. It was just so filling and incredible. And you can't go to Istanbul without trying the San Sebastian cheesecake, the best cheesecake I've had, hands down. And you can just see my reaction here. I have it and I am just lost for words. Of course, Istanbul is the land of kebab. That's what you have in Turkey. And one of the great kebab places I had was Shehzade Çek Kebab, which was served on the knife, on the skewer. It was so succulent. And of course, the amazing starters that Turkey has are filling on its own, and I ended it with a lovely, beautiful lamb shank where the meat just came off the bone. You know what? I deserve to treat myself to a traditional Turkish hammam experience. Let's do it. So there are no cameras allowed inside, unfortunately. Or fortunately, actually, because there are other people doing hammam as well. And I didn't know what to expect, but you can actually see the difference in my face. It is, I mean, I'm not one to compliment myself, but it is glowing. You know, it's literally shining. I paid for the Istanbul Dream. It costs about 60 euros. And then I got the face mask as well at the end for an additional 5 euros. So when you actually consider that, it's very good value. This is for 1 hour. And for that, I was taken in, I was in a sauna for 10-15 minutes, then I was laid on a hot slab, hot water was put on me, and then a massage, then the bubbles came out, bubbles all over me, then the scrub came out, scrubbed me head to toe, shampoo was done, cold water done, face mask. I can genuinely fall asleep right now. That was incredible. This is the Çalhanoğlu hammam in Istanbul, but there are so many like this. Damn, I really had a good night's sleep. Anyways, it's time to wake up for another day, rise and shine, and we're hitting the Istanbul Grand Bazaar. Welcome to the Grand Bazaar of Istanbul. I'm lost. That's the genuine reaction I have. It is absolutely chaotic. There are 4,000 shops here in the Grand Bazaar, an estimated 200 to 300,000 people visit the Grand Bazaar on a daily basis. And yeah, you can imagine 4,000 shops, many thousands of square meters of retail space, with absolutely everything and anything is available here. Having said that, it's huge, right? But I'm just a bit... It's also not amazing at the same time, because fair enough, when something goes into disrepair you need to renovate it, but it feels too new, you know. And this is a historic Grand Bazaar that was first sort of inaugurated around the time of the conquest in 1453, and maybe at its full size, reached its full size in about 17 something maybe. But it obviously underwent so much renovation that it just feels like a shopping arcade with some motifs that make it look a bit more older. More than half of it, I would say, is just fake goods. I'm not saying anything about fake goods, but that's all there is. It's actually overwhelming, because in London, when you think of fake stuff, you think of stuff that maybe slightly resembles it. And people who've been to Camden in London know that you can get some fake stuff there. But the scale here is ridiculous, right? And to be fair, like, all of it is actually made here in Turkey, believe it or not. there's always somebody that likes to photobomb me in these vlogs. On the road from the Grand Bazaar, we have the Spice Bazaar, also known as Misir Çarşısı, which actually means Egyptian Bazaar. Why is the Spice Bazaar also called the Egyptian Bazaar? Well, because it was built with the revenues from the Ottoman province of Egypt in the year 1660. And the revenues that came from the Spice Bazaar used to go towards the upkeep of the Yeni Jami Mosque, which is next to the Spice Bazaar. And even today, you can get all kinds of spices, and it is one of the largest bazaars in Istanbul, of course, after the Grand Bazaar. On to our next stop, the Dolmabahce Palace. So then we are here at the Dolmabahce Palace. Now, this angle isn't amazing. It's because I had to give in my gimbal at security. Unfortunately, I've not been able to take my gimbal in, and to be honest, they've also said no photos or videos anywhere, but I'll try my best to take some inside if I can, and if I do, you'll obviously see an overlay on top of this face. But the Dolmabahce Palace served as the final administrative center and palace of the Ottoman Empire. It opened in 1856 and was home to 6 sultans, the last caliphs of the Ottoman Empire. And it was built because, you know what, Topkapi Palace, it's lovely, it's nice, but it wasn't contemporary, I guess, is what they felt. They felt they needed something more modern, something they could present as a more modern, progressive. And to be fair, at that time in the Ottoman Empire, there were a lot of reforms taking place socially, economically. We had the Tanzimat reforms as well, and there was this general sort of reformation, and part of that was this new palace that sits on the shores of the Bosphorus in the Beşiktaş neighborhood. And yes, if you are wondering where have you heard Beşiktaş from, that's correct. The famous Turkish football team Beşiktaş is literally in front of my eyes. Their stadium is right there. This is the stunning and magnificent Dolmabahce Palace. Down the road from the Dolmabahce Palace is the Ortaköy Mosque, built by Sultan Abdülmecid I in 1855. Size-wise, it's so small when you consider the size of these massive Ottoman mosques. And the interior is unlike anything I've ever seen here in Istanbul, because it mixes this more contemporary Western infused with Ottoman Turkish architecture, and it is jaw-dropping. Speaking of contemporary, let's head to the heart of modern Istanbul, Taksim Square. So then, on our final day, I've decided to walk down Istiklal Street. And Istiklal, of course, it means independence. In Turkish, it also means independence in Farsi as well. I cannot, for the sake of my life, get this gimbal to work. But going down Istiklal Street, it starts from Taksim Square. So Taksim, if you know Turkish or even if you know Urdu, Taksim means to split, right? Taksim karna, like to split up, to distribute essentially. And the name comes from the fact that water used to come from the north of Istanbul down to Taksim Square, and it used to then be distributed to other areas of the city, hence the name Taksim, and it became Taksim Square, and that was established by Sultan Mahmud I. Now from Taksim Square to Beyoğlu and Şişhane station, we have Istiklal Caddesi, or Independence Avenue, which is the main shopping thoroughfare of quote-unquote modern Istanbul. You can see it as the Oxford Street of Istanbul, the Fifth Avenue of Istanbul, something along those lines, if that makes sense. It's also home to the heritage tramways that exist in Istanbul that run up and down these tram lines in the bright red of the Turkish flag. Of course, this city used to be full of tramways. As I was talking about the Heritage Tramway, this pulled up behind me, and this is the Istanbul Heritage Tramway that I was saying is painted in the bright red of the Turkish flag. And it is lovely, it's beautiful, it's, I guess, restoring the heritage, I guess, and that's what we have to keep in mind when I'm visiting all these places, is celebrating the beauty of our history and our culture. Our, as in, I don't mean, I'm not Turkish obviously, but from wherever we're from, yes, we move on with the times, yes, we modernize, yes, we progress and we develop and so on, but we should always remember where the history and tradition and culture lies. And that is embodied here by the Istanbul Heritage Tram. Final mosque I went to is the Nur Osmaniye Mosque, which was built in the 18th century and was the first imperial mosque of Istanbul that integrated both Baroque and neoclassical elements in its construction. Now, one of the lovely experiences here in Istanbul is the sea, and behind me is the Bosphorus Strait. And you can take a river cruise, obviously you can do that, or you can just take a regular ferry, because it turns out that you can use it as a commuting way, and you can use your Istanbul card, which is the public transport card, for that as well. And it's cheap. Public transport in Istanbul, one way for any journey, no matter what mode of transport, 7 lira, so about 30 something p. And it's a beautiful experience going on the ferry. It reminds me of Hong Kong, where you can cross the harbour between the two sides. Here you can use the ferry to cross between the Asian side and the European side, and it's really beautiful, and you can get views of Hagia Sophia, Sultan Ahmed Mosque, and all the sites in Istanbul. Fortunately, it so happened to be the case that I was taking this ferry on my journey to the airport to go back to London. Now, the Havata bus that goes from Sabiha Gökçen International Airport goes to the European side and the Asian side. I intentionally took the ferry to the Asian side to catch the bus from there so that I could get this lovely view of the Bosphorus Strait. Anyways, it's been an incredible journey. Thank you to everyone for joining me on this journey and on this vlog, and I hope you all get the opportunity to visit Istanbul, and I also hope that I get the opportunity to go again. Once again, like, comment and subscribe.